Kola Adeyemi knew how to buy silence. His penthouse stood high above Lagos Island, its tall glass windows looking down on the restless city. From up there, the horns, shouts, and street laughter sounded like a faraway movie with the volume turned off. Once upon a time, those walls had echoed with laughter. His wife Adiz teasing him over breakfast, their son Timmy racing his toy cars across the marble floor. But that was 2 years ago, before the accident that took them both and left Kola with a mansion full of memories and no reason to smile. Now, his life was a strict routine. Wake before dawn, answer board calls, argue through meetings, close deals, stare at numbers until midnight. He didn't dream anymore, he calculated. His assistant called him a genius. His employees whispered that he was heartless. And the tabloids? They loved to describe him as the billionaire who never laughs. Kola didn't care. When your heart feels locked away, who bothers painting the door? That Wednesday morning, the sky carried a heavy gray promise of rain. Standing by his office window, Kola watched the clouds move like tired soldiers. His driver waited downstairs beside the sleek black car that always took him from one glass building to another. Business, money, silence, that was the rhythm. But just as he stepped outside, something caught his eye. Across the busy street, a little girl ran through the crowd. She couldn't have been more than 8. Her school uniform, a yellow pinafore, was already wet around the edges. Tiny blue beads clinked softly at the ends of her braids as she hurried toward a roadside hawker whose bowls of fruit were getting drenched by the sudden drizzle. The girl opened a bright orange umbrella, large enough to cover both herself and the woman's goods. The hawker looked up in surprise, then smiled. A tired, grateful smile. The girl grinned back, her face glowing like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She didn't seem to care that her socks were soaked or that people brushed past her in a hurry. For that small moment, she was simply kind. Something stirred in Kola's chest, faint, unfamiliar. He could hear the sounds he'd ignored for years. The splashing of rain, the chatter of pedestrians, the crackle of Lagos coming alive. It was strange how one small act could make everything feel louder, realer. He blinked, irritated at himself. It was just a child. He had a meeting to attend, an empire to manage. With a sigh, he got into the car and told the driver to move. But as the car pulled away, Kola glanced at the side mirror and saw her again. The little girl with the orange umbrella, helping the hawker laugh through the rain. Her bright face lingered in his mind long after the glass towers swallowed the street from view. He didn't know it yet, but that tiny moment, that single smile in the rain, had just cracked the glass that had kept his heart frozen for 2 long years. The next morning, Lagos was already awake before the sun found its full strength. Car horns sang their usual chorus, hawkers shouted prices like DJs on a mission, and the air smelled of roasted corn and wet dust from last night's rain. Kola Adeyemi sat at the back of his car, pretending to read the day's business headlines. But his eyes kept flicking to the window. He didn't tell his driver why, but when they approached the market street, he said casually, "Loop the block once more. Traffic's bad ahead." The driver frowned slightly. There was no traffic. Still, he obeyed. And there she was again, the little girl with the orange umbrella. She was in the same yellow school uniform, her braids swinging as she ran from one stall to another. She tilted her umbrella over an old newspaper vendor whose papers were getting wet, then dashed toward a small boy playing near a puddle. "No, no, you'll fall inside," she said, tugging him away with laughter. Kola felt something loosen inside him. Without thinking, he opened the door and stepped out. His driver blinked in confusion but didn't argue. Nobody argued with Kola Adeyemi. "Good morning," Kola said, his voice unsure, as he walked toward her. The girl turned and looked up, surprised but not scared. "Good morning, sir." He stared at the umbrella dripping water onto the street. "Your umbrella is doing too much work," he said, almost teasing. She smiled, bright and unbothered. "It's doing exactly enough. Uncle says umbrellas are for people, not just heads." Kola raised a brow. "And who is Uncle?" "Ayo," she said proudly. "He's my neighbor. He fixes radios. But he says some hearts need fixing more than radios." Kola froze for a moment. The words hit harder than they should have. He sounds wise, he muttered. Zuri nodded, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. He is. He also says rich people forget that kindness is free. Kola almost laughed. Almost. And your name? Zuri, she said, standing tall. It means beautiful. He found himself smiling slightly. It suits you. Then, without thinking, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills. Take this, he said. But Zuri shook her head firmly. Not today, sir. He blinked. Why not? Because I didn't do it for money, she said simply. But if you want to help, you can hold the umbrella while I help Mama Ifioma pack her oranges. Kola stared at her, a billionaire with global investors, now being asked to hold an umbrella in a wet marketplace. For a second, he almost refused. Then, for reasons even he couldn't explain, he took it. So there he stood, expensive shoes splashing in muddy water, one hand holding an orange umbrella, while the little girl crouched beside a fruit seller arranging oranges into baskets. People stopped to stare. Is that not Adeyemi? One man whispered. Another chuckled. He's holding an umbrella. Wonders shall never end. Kola heard them, but strangely he didn't care. For the first time in years, he didn't care about what anyone thought. When Zuri finished helping, she dusted her hands and smiled at him. You did good, she said, taking back the umbrella. He looked down at his wet shoes and laughed quietly. Did I? Yes, she said cheerfully. See? Not so hard to be useful. Useful, he repeated softly, testing the word on his tongue. Felt strange, but good. Zuri twirled the umbrella once before walking off. You should come on Saturday, she called back. We clean the market gutters. You can bring gloves. Umbrellas can rest. Kola watched her disappear into the crowd, the bright orange umbrella bobbing above heads like a small piece of sunshine. For the first time in a long while, Kola didn't rush to his next meeting. He stood there, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Alive. Saturday morning came with sunshine that smelled like wet earth and fried akara. The city was already humming, full of voices and engines and the clatter of busy hands. Kola Adeyemi, Lagos' most feared businessman, sat in the back of his SUV wearing work gloves that probably cost more than most people's rent. His driver kept glancing at him through the mirror, confused. Sir, are you sure this is the right place? Kola didn't answer. He just nodded and stepped out into the chatter of the market. The air was thick with the scent of pepper, engine oil, and fresh rain. Around him, traders arranged their stalls while barefoot kids ran between puddles, chasing laughter. For a man used to polished marble floors and quiet conference rooms, it felt like another planet. And right in the middle of that chaos stood Zuri, bright, fearless, and waving like she'd known him forever. You came, she shouted, running toward him. I told them you would. He found himself smiling before he could stop it. I said I would bring gloves, didn't I? Expensive gloves? Ao the radio fixer teased, standing beside her. Be careful, Zuri. Those gloves look like they have bodyguards. Everyone laughed, even Kola. Zuri grabbed his hand and started making introductions. This is Auntie Ronk. She sells fabrics. And this is Ao, my neighbor. He fixes radios and sometimes people's bad moods. And this, she said proudly, placing her hands on her hips, is our big secret. Kola raised an eyebrow. What secret? Zuri smiled, eyes twinkling. Our secret is we never wait for the government to do what our hands can do. Before he could respond, someone handed him a rusty shovel. Another man showed him how to lift the metal grate covering the gutter. The smell that rushed out made him gag. It was like the city's stomach had turned inside out. Zuri didn't flinch. She picked up a bucket and held it out with a dramatic bow. For you, Oga Bucket. Kola laughed. A real laugh, not the polite kind he used in meetings. Thank you, Madam Umbrella. For the next 2 hours, he worked. He shoveled out black sludge, carried stones, and learned to joke in the market's easy rhythm. Sweat trickled down his back, and his perfectly ironed shirt became a memory. But it didn't matter. The laughter around him made the air lighter. Ao hummed an old highlife tune as he worked beside him. You know, Ao said, it's not the smell that's bad. It's the fact that we let things rot too long before we clean them. Kola didn't know if he meant the gutters or life. Auntie Ronk laughed as she passed. Oga Adeyemi, you're too skinny for this kind of work. Next time, I'll bring you jollof rice on credit. Market price for billionaires. Even Zuri giggled so hard she almost dropped her bucket. By the time they finished, the gutters were clear. Rainwater flowed freely again, rushing through the channels like a thirsty river finally set free. Zuri wiped her forehead and clapped her hands. Now the market can breathe, she said proudly. Kola looked around. Everyone was smiling, cheering, patting one another on the back. And for the first time in years, he felt something move in his chest. Not pain, not emptiness, but pride. A warm kind of pride that didn't come from money or headlines. He straightened up, his back aching but his heart oddly light. For a brief moment, he turned instinctively, searching the crowd, half expecting to see Adiz smiling at him like she used to. Then reality hit. She was gone. Zuri noticed the change in his face. Without a word, she slipped her tiny hand into his gloved one. My mama says pain is like rain, she said softly. You can duck it or share an umbrella. Kola's throat tightened. And what do you do? She looked up, eyes shining. We share. Umbrellas are bigger than heads. Remember? And just like that, Kola realized sometimes the smallest people carry the biggest lessons. Monday mornings at Adeyemi Holdings were known for being ruthless. The boardroom buzzed with polished accents, expensive perfumes, and clinking pens. Charts flashed across the screen, numbers in black, profits in green. Kola Adeyemi sat at the head of the long glass table, his expression as unreadable as ever. The directors argued about a new real estate deal, plots, returns, deadlines. He gave his usual sharp answers, but today his thoughts were elsewhere. Zuri's voice echoed in his mind. Umbrellas are for people, not just heads. He could still see her small frame in that yellow pinafore, still smell the mix of rain, oranges, and dust from the market. When lunch break came, his assistant, Tade, asked, Sir, should I schedule your afternoon calls? Kola closed his tablet slowly. No. Clear my afternoon. Tade blinked, stunned. Sir, you heard me. By dusk, his car pulled up at the familiar street. The market buzzed with evening energy. Children chasing after roasted corn smoke. Women laughing over loud radios. Traders packing up for the night. But this time, Kola wasn't alone. Behind him were an architect and a civil engineer, both in crisp shirts and polished shoes, looking completely lost in the chaos. The engineer whispered, Sir, are you sure this is safe? Kola didn't answer. Ao, the radio fixer, appeared from behind a stall, grinning. Ah, Mr. Big Man brought company. Come, come. Let me give you people Zobo. You look like you only drink boardroom air. The architect tried to decline politely, but Ao had already handed them jam jars filled with bright red Zobo. The sweetness hit them before they could protest. Kola smiled faintly. Gentlemen, we're here for something different. He spread out a few sketches on the back of an old fruit crate. I want to build modular awnings over this section, something simple but strong. A proper drainage system, solar-powered lights, maybe a water collection point. No fancy nonsense. Just something that lasts. Zuri, sitting cross-legged on a low stool with her orange umbrella hugged to her chest, listened as if he was reading her a story. So you mean when it rains, people won't run away? Exactly, Kola said, surprised at how soft his tone sounded. We can build a roof for the rain. Zuri smiled. A roof for the rain, she repeated dreamily, as if the words themselves were a prayer. The next morning they started. Word spread like wildfire. At first, people came out of curiosity. That billionaire is back again, oh. But curiosity turned into energy. Young men offered to dig. Women brought food. Even school children ran errands, carrying buckets and fetching water. The architect, once nervous, started laughing as he gave instructions in the local dialect. he barely remembered from childhood. The engineer rolled up his sleeves, wiping sweat with a handkerchief and shaking his head in disbelief. And right in the middle of it all was Kola, his jacket gone, shirt sleeves rolled, face damp with sweat. He lifted wood, carried pipes, and greeted people by name because Zuri whispered their names like a secret guide. That's Mama Kuti. She sells plantain. That's Baba Musa. Don't forget to greet him, he likes respect. Each day, more hands joined. By the end of the week, the market had transformed. The new awnings shone silver in the sunlight, and the gutters ran clear. Lights flickered to life at dusk, chasing away the darkness that used to hide the market's beauty. When it was done, people gathered to celebrate. Drums played, food passed from hand to hand, and laughter filled the air. Auntie Ronk hugged Kola tightly. "You're not so cold after all," she said, eyes bright with tears. Kola chuckled softly, looking down at the little girl beside him. "Don't thank me," he said. "Blame the umbrella." Zuri giggled and twirled her orange umbrella like a trophy. "Told you it's magic." And for the first time in years, Kola believed in a little magic too. It began with one picture. Someone had snapped it on a phone. Kola Adeyemi, billionaire of glass towers and silent rooms, standing in the mud beside a little girl holding an orange umbrella. Within hours, the photo hit the internet like harmattan dust in the wind. By morning, the tabloids were feasting. "Billionaire plays hero in slum PR stunt?" One headline sneered. Another had a closer shot, Kola lifting a wooden beam while Zuri steadied a bucket behind him. The caption read, "Who is the market girl changing Adeyemi?" Soon, camera vans clogged the narrow market street. Reporters elbowed for space, shouting questions over the noise of traders and honking bikes. Shutters clicked like angry insects. Zuri froze as a man with a big camera tried to stop her, shoving his microphone toward her face. "Little girl, how much is he paying you?" She frowned and held up her orange umbrella like a shield. "You shouldn't block people's way," she said firmly. Before the man could speak again, Kola stepped forward. His voice was calm but carried power. "Enough," he said. The crowd stilled for a second. "If you must take pictures, take this." He gestured around, at the new drainage channels glinting cleanly, at the sturdy awnings that kept traders dry, at the market lights flickering to life as dusk approached. "Photograph what helps," he added quietly. The reporters exchanged uncertain glances. One woman from a reputable TV station stepped closer. Her tone was softer. "Mr. Adeyemi, why now? After all these years of staying invisible?" For a moment he couldn't answer. The question felt heavier than the camera lenses aimed at him. He thought of Timmy's toy car still sitting under the couch he could never move, and of Adi's teacup, the one he never had the heart to wash because her lipstick stain still lived on its rim. He took a slow breath. "Because grief turned my house into a museum," he said finally. This girl opened a window. There was silence. Even the vendors paused. The reporter lowered her microphone, eyes soft. "Thank you," she said simply. By nightfall, the video clip went viral. Some viewers laughed, calling it an act. Others typed long paragraphs about hope and kindness. The hashtag Roof for the Rain began to trend. Then something unexpected happened. Donations started pouring in, some big, most small, all meaningful. Envelopes arrived at Adeyemi Holdings reception with shaky handwriting. For the roof, for the rain, for Zuri's umbrella. Children sent hand-drawn notes with tiny paper umbrellas taped to them. An elderly woman in Enugu mailed a 500 naira note with a message. "I can't come to Lagos, but tell the girl I'm proud of her." When Kola brought the pile of letters to the market, Zuri stared wide-eyed. "All this? For us?" she asked. "For the market," he corrected gently. She grinned. "And for the umbrellas too." They sat on a wooden bench as Ao read out a few of the letters in his deep, sing-song voice. Laughter burst out as he stumbled over the spelling of philanthropy. Zuri turned to Kola, eyes bright. "People can be so kind," she said softly. He looked at her. This child who had somehow cracked open his silent world, and nodded. "They can," he replied. What he didn't say but felt deep in his chest was something new. For the first time in years, when he thought about the world, he didn't say they. He said we. And somewhere in that small shift, the man behind the glass finally began to feel human again. Thursday morning broke heavy and gray, the kind of sky that made the air smell like metal and lightning. From his office on the 25th floor, Kola Adeyemi watched the clouds bruise over Lagos Island. The streets looked smaller from up there, and for the first time in weeks he felt uneasy. By 9 o'clock the market should have been alive, the usual shouts, the laughter, and the orange flash of Zuri's umbrella weaving through the stalls. But she wasn't there. He kept glancing at his phone as if a message would appear. None did. He tried to work. The quarterly report glared up from his desk, filled with numbers that meant nothing. He read the same paragraph 6 times and couldn't remember a single line. His assistant asked a question about profit margins. Kola just waved him off. Something in his chest refused to settle. By noon, he was already in his car, ignoring calls from the board. The driver looked back nervously. "Sir, the market again?" "Yes," Kola said, his voice low. When they arrived, the place looked the same, busy, noisy, colorful, but it felt different. The laughter had a missing note. Auntie Ronk saw him first. Her usual bright face was tight with worry. "Zuri didn't come today," he said quickly. Auntie Ronk sighed. "Her mama collapsed this morning. Malaria turned wicked overnight. They took her to the clinic by Igbosir." Kola didn't wait for directions. "Get in," he said to Ao, who was already grabbing his slippers. The drive was fast and tense. Kola's hands gripped the seat as if the road itself might change the outcome. His pulse drummed louder than the rain beginning to tap on the windshield. The clinic was small and dimly lit, the kind of place where medicine smelled mixed with fear. Plastic chairs lined the narrow corridor, their legs scraping the floor each time someone shifted. Zuri sat in one of them, her umbrella closed beside her. Her small hands twisted together in her lap. She looked up when she saw him, tried to smile, couldn't. "Uncle Kola," she whispered. He knelt in front of her. "She will be okay," he said automatically, though he didn't know if it was true. Then he stood and went to work, not the boardroom kind, but the human kind. He spoke to the nurse, paid every bill on the counter, and called his private doctor. Within the hour, new medication and a transfusion were arranged. The staff whispered as they recognized his name, but he didn't care about recognition. He cared about Zuri's trembling fingers. When the 4-line was finally set and her mother began to breathe more steadily, Kola returned to the hallway. Zuri was still sitting there, her chin buried in her knees. She looked up at him with eyes too old for her small face. "Thank you," she murmured. He sat beside her and said quietly, "You once told me umbrellas are for people, not just heads." He reached out, resting a hand gently over hers. "Let me hold it now." For a moment, neither spoke. The clinic hummed with generators, nurses passed, and thunder rolled somewhere far away. They stayed through the evening. When the nurses dimmed the lights, Zuri's head drooped sideways until it rested against his shoulder. Her hair smelled faintly of soap and rain. He didn't move. He just sat there, watching the rise and fall of her breathing. The cracked ceiling above them looked endless, and for a long time Kola counted 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. Somewhere between 1 and 200, he realized his heart ached again. Not with the sharp pain of loss, but with something softer, something dangerous. Hope terrified him, steadied him. For the first time in years, Kola Adeyemi didn't want the night to end. The morning Zuri's mother came home from the clinic felt like the city itself exhaled. The air was clearer, the market hummed softer, and for once, Kola's chest didn't feel like stone. The doctors declared her stable. She still looked weak, but the danger had passed. Kola made sure she wouldn't have to worry about a single thing. He rented a quiet room behind Auntie Ronk's stall, hired a nurse to check in twice a day, and filled the pantry with fresh food and medicine. Neighbors volunteered to cook and clean in turns. Zuri tried to thank everyone at once until Kola chuckled and told her, "Save your breath for stories." When he finally turned to leave, her small fingers caught the edge of his jacket. "Don't stop coming," she said. No smile, no plea. Just honest, solid words that landed right in his chest. "I won't," he promised, realizing he meant it. Truth came easily these days. Back at Adeyemi Tower, the familiar glass walls no longer felt protective. They felt small. He couldn't shake the picture of Zuri's market, its laughter, its smells, its heartbeat. So instead of diving into merger reports, he called his architect. "Cancel the boardroom briefing. I want you downtown." That evening, he walked into Ao's shop. The man grinned and waved a folded sheet of paper. "She's been planning something again," Ao said. He spread the page on the counter. A child's drawing, bold lines, crooked letters. A bright roof, books stacked like rainbows, a playground, and in the corner, a small music room with stick figures holding drums. At the top, in Zuri's careful handwriting, it read, "The Umbrella House, a roof for hearts." Kola stared at it for a long time. Something shifted inside him, a gear catching after years of rust. "She wants a place where kids can learn and play," Ao said. "She said people's hearts need roofs too." Kola smiled softly. "Then we'll build one." The next morning, that same drawing sat in the center of Adeyemi Holdings' conference table, between polished laptops and expensive pens. His executives looked puzzled as he stood before them. "I want this designed," he said simply. "No marble, no gold, light air color. A library, a workshop, and a small music room. Make it real." His CFO frowned. "Sir, would this fall under corporate philanthropy?" Kola met his gaze steadily. "No. Corporate family line item." For once, no one argued. Within 3 weeks, the first trucks rolled into the market. Zuri arrived every morning in her yellow dress, armed with her orange umbrella and a notebook she called her supervisor log. She walked around with serious cheeks, pointing at beams, measuring shadows, and announcing, "The sun fits here." Everyone started calling her Engineer Zuri. Kola worked beside her. He carried sandbags, signed documents, and sometimes just watched as she danced between workers, turning construction noise into music. Every evening before he left, she'd stop him with her daily ritual. "3 good things," she'd say, folding her arms. "Go on." He'd sigh in mock defeat, then smile. 1. Your mother laughed today. 2. The roof frame didn't collapse. 3. You still haven't lost that umbrella. She giggled. Perfect. Gratitude stretches the heart. That's what Ao says. That night, back in his apartment, Kola wrote those words on a yellow sticky note. Gratitude stretches the heart, and pressed it inside his wallet beside an old family photo. For the first time in years, the picture didn't just remind him of what he'd lost. It reminded him of what he was building. Something living, breathing, shared. The sky broke open before noon. Rain came with a roar, thick and heavy, pounding against rooftops as if the clouds had decided to empty every tear they'd ever stored. Lagos streets filled within minutes. Gutters overflowed. Cars stalled. Vendors scrambled to save what they could. Inside Adeyemi Tower, the generators kicked in automatically. Staff continued their calls and meetings as if the world outside wasn't drowning. But Kola couldn't ignore it. He stood by the glass wall, watching the rain blur the city into watercolor. The market, the umbrella house, Zuri. He grabbed his jacket and was out the door before his assistant could ask where he was going. By the time he reached the market, the road had become a brown river. The car couldn't pass. He jumped out, rolled up his sleeves, and waded in. The water was icy and strong, pulling at his legs, smelling of mud and oil. What he saw made his heart both break and swell. The neighbors had formed a human chain, hand to hand, helping one another carry supplies to higher ground. Buckets floated by like lost boats. Children clung to the awnings of the half-finished umbrella house. And right in the middle of it all was Zuri, soaked to the bone, shouting orders like a tiny general. "Lift the books. Tie the tarps. Aunties, go inside. Children, here!" she yelled, her braids sticking to her cheeks, her voice fierce and steady. Kola sloshed forward, helping a man move a crate of rice onto the steps. Thunder cracked overhead. The new drainage was working, but barely. Then a scream cut through the rain. A mother was crying, her hands clutching at the air. My baby! My baby! He slipped. The water! Kola didn't think. He just moved. He followed her pointing finger to the far end of the street, where the current dragged a small bundle of color toward the culvert. His heart seized. Without hesitation, he dove in, fighting the current, every muscle screaming. The rain blinded him, but he caught sight of a tiny shirt. He lunged, fingers brushing cloth, then gripping tight. The boy was limp but breathing. The grate loomed ahead, the same one he and Zuri had cleared weeks ago. He slammed his shoulder against it, pushing back the water. For a terrifying second, he thought they'd both be pulled under. Then rough hands caught his arms. Oh, others. Together they hauled him and the child to safety. They stumbled onto the steps of the umbrella house, soaked, shaking, coughing up rainwater. For a long, breathless moment, no one spoke. Then the mother ran forward, crying and clutching her child to her chest. The boy whimpered and blinked. Alive. And then laughter, wild, grateful laughter, spilled from everyone. It wasn't the kind of laughter born from jokes, but the kind that throws a rope over fear and pulls you back to life. Zuri stood before Kola, dripping, trembling, her umbrella still clutched in one hand. The storm had already drenched everything, but she pressed it into his hands anyway, like it was a medal. Now you see, she said softly, when you love people, the city is your family. Kola stared at the child breathing against his mother's chest. He thought of Timmy, his little boy, and how long it had taken him to understand that love isn't just a memory you protect. It's a verb you live. He looked at Zuri, her tiny frame glowing in the lightning flash. I see, he said quietly, voice shaking but sure. I see. The rain poured harder, washing through the streets, but it no longer felt cruel. It felt cleansing, like the city itself was being reborn under the roof they had built together. The morning of the opening felt like Lagos had decided to smile. The sky was a clear, endless blue, the kind that looked freshly washed. Streamers fluttered across the narrow streets. Drummers gathered near the gate, their beats thumping like excited hearts. Vendors sold puff-puff and zobo on one side while schoolchildren in bright uniforms giggled and whispered on the other. The umbrella house stood proudly at the center of it all, painted in soft orange and sky blue, its glass windows reflecting sunlight like laughter. Above the entrance hung a plaque that read, "A roof for the rain, a room for every heart." Kola stood beside Zuri, who wore a new yellow dress and shoes that squeaked when she walked. Auntie Ronk had tied her scarf high, and Ao carried a trumpet that looked older than both of them. When it was time, the crowd counted down, 3, 2, 1, and Zuri cut the red ribbon with a pair of scissors nearly too big for her hands. Cheers burst like fireworks. Children rushed inside, their voices rising in pure wonder. They discovered books that smelled like fresh paper and hope, paints that turned small hands into rainbows, and a music room where Ao's trumpet tried to remember an old high-life tune. The laughter that filled the space was brighter than any light Kola had ever installed in his buildings. A journalist from a local TV station approached, microphone ready. "Mr. Adeyemi," she said, smiling. "What changed you?" Kola paused. Cameras pointed at him, but for once he didn't feel the need to sound clever. His eyes drifted across the crowd, to the walls alive with color, to the mothers chatting under the new roof, to Zuri kneeling beside a younger child, helping him trace the letter A in the air with her finger. He thought of the man he'd been, the one who hid behind glass and numbers, who let silence become his language. He thought of the day a small girl shared an umbrella not to impress, but simply because kindness came naturally to her. Finally, he said softly, "Someone shared an umbrella with me. A little girl reminded me that love isn't something you wait for. It's something you practice, again and again." The journalist smiled. The crowd clapped. And for the first time, Kola didn't flinch at applause. Hours later, when the reporters packed up and the last balloon drifted away, Kola found Zuri sitting on the steps, kicking her legs gently. He knelt beside her. "What do you want most now?" he asked. She didn't even pause. "For people to keep showing up," she said. Even when nobody is watching. He felt that sentence land deep in his chest. He nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. Zuri smiled, her orange umbrella leaning against the wall beside them, its fabric patched and shining in the afternoon light. Above them, the sign glimmered in gold letters. And for once, Kola realized it wasn't just a building. It was a beginning. The months that followed unfolded like ribbons caught in the wind. Colorful, unpredictable, and full of music. The umbrella house became more than a building. It became a heartbeat. Every day, its doors opened to laughter and learning. Children arrived after school, their uniforms wrinkled but their eyes wide with curiosity. Mothers gathered in the sewing room, their hands dancing over fabric as they whispered stories of resilience. Teenagers crowded around Ao's workshop, tinkering with wires, radios, and dreams that hummed like engines finding rhythm. Kola was there most mornings, no longer the man hiding behind screens and silence. He answered emails to the background sound of giggling children and humming machines. The clatter of life had become his favorite soundtrack. He no longer rushed through the city as a stranger in tinted glass. Sometimes he just walked, without security, without a plan. He learned the vowels of Lagos again. The sing-song calls of street vendors, the bus conductor's half-sung arguments, the old man's morning blessings, the muezzin's steady call, and the joyful chorus of church bells on Sundays. Each sound stitched him back into the city's living fabric. He even laughed more, at jokes that had no business purpose, at mistakes that used to ruin his mood. And once, in the music room, he cried. A young girl had found a second-hand violin and was teaching herself to play. That afternoon, she performed Adi's favorite hymn, the one that used to fill his home with light. The melody cracked something open in him. Zuri, sitting nearby, quietly handed him a tissue. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. One evening, when the sky burned gold and the lagoon shimmered like spilled honey, Kola climbed to the rooftop garden. Zuri was already there, watching the sunset with her chin resting on her knees. She held her old orange umbrella, opening it slowly, though not a cloud was in sight. "Why the umbrella?" he asked, smiling. She grinned, eyes bright. "Habit," she said. "And hope," he chuckled, leaning against the railing. "What is hope, Zuri?" She thought for a while, biting her lip the way she did when she searched for the right words. "Hope," she said finally, "is an umbrella you carry even when the weather app says you're fine." He stared at her, heart full. Then softly, "You taught me to love again, not like before, chained to what I lost, but like this, open to what I can give." Below them, Lagos glittered, noisy, tender, unafraid. Kola closed the umbrella and raised it toward the sky like a flag. "Come rain," he whispered. "We have a roof." Zuri laughed, the sound small but powerful enough to echo against the wind. Together, they stood shoulder to shoulder on that rooftop, the billionaire who had once been hollow and the little girl who had filled him with purpose. No glass between them, no armor, only an orange circle of belonging, big enough for more than two. And as the first stars appeared, the city breathed around them, alive, imperfect, and full of practiced love.